It's extremely vital that in those first few seconds, one, you don't let them know they're watching an ad. So don't start by saying the name of your product or your brand. Don't start with your logo.
We may interview someone who has great words but can't put them all together properly.
Understanding how to interview, how to guide the conversation, and how to get what you need without making a non-actor try to be something that they're not.
Heyo, welcome everyone to today's episode. Today I have Alyssa, Trip, and Adam. My name is Nathan, and today we're going to talk about testimonials and case studies and how valuable they are, and maybe we'll give you some tips on what to do and what not to do. With decades of editing experience like yourself, Adam, what is something that you will say that people don't really understand when it comes to testimonials and case studies?
So I think the biggest thing that people worry about is whether or not they're going to sound good and intelligent when they speak in front of the camera. Cameras are weird, right? Like as soon as you turn them on, I think all of us, even in this podcast, I think there's moments where you're just like, I'm being watched, And not only am I being watched, I'm being recorded, and then I'll be watched over and over and over again. And I think one of the big things is helping people understand that like we're on their team and we're going to make them look good. And so there's a lot of things that go into pre-production, and I'll let the producers talk about that, to how we treat people on set. I think one of the biggest things that goes into the case studies and testimonials is understanding that these people aren't professional actors, right? They're experts in their life or they're experts in their field, right? So if it's a patient testimonial, they're the expert on what they experienced, right? And so we get to discover their experience as we spend the day with them, filming them and interviewing them. And of course, there's pre-interviews and stuff that happen, but there's things that will come up on set where if we do our jobs right, they will feel comfortable trusting us and telling us. And because there may be moments where we ask a wife, which we've had this experience, whose husband had cancer, like, what was it like when he came home and spoke to you? And that's like a really heavy question to ask somebody. And so if you don't do the due diligence and making sure that they know that they can trust us, that we genuinely care about their story, then that becomes a mechanical answer because they're in front of a camera, which feels mechanical. So I think that's one of the bigger things that I approach each one of these with a mindset of is this isn't a professional actor. They may need some help understanding how we flow through things, and they need to know that we're on their side.
Yeah, and to add more, once you put a camera on top, you're even for us when we're camera operators, you put us on front, we're gonna blank out a bit, So and again, this is from our experience. We don't really know what the producers are doing to ease that, to make it even easier for us. So Trip or Alyssa, if you guys can explain to us, like, how does the process of before we getting cameras on stands, what do you guys do? How does that process go about when you talk to clients or even patients?
Yeah, I mean, Alyssa, if you want me to go with this, talking to patients or doctors beforehand, I think I have experience in past job experience working with people who are facing their fears. I worked as a zipline guide, helping people with fears of height, go down zip lines at like up to 45 miles an hour. And when you see people kind of go into a really scary, they get really shut down. And so you can see this happen to people before they get on camera, and you're gonna maintain eye contact. You're going to talk to them like everything's okay, because everything is okay. We're not, like Adam said, we're not going to gotcha you. We're not trying to make you look dumb or bad or older than you are or bigger than you are. We're trying to make you look the best you are to tell your story. And then there's also a lot of things we can do is just say, hey, here's what to wear on camera so you look good. Here's a professional makeup artist to make you present well. And I used to think that makeup was a little bit of a smoke and mirrors, until someone said, I don't feel confident without makeup on my face. But when I have makeup on my face, it's kind of like armor. I can go do so much more. So it's just helping create this environment, both with what we're doing with our nonverbals, with, what we're saying, and then also with these tips and tricks on how to make them present best on camera.
to piggyback on that, I think like some of the common mistakes that healthcare marketers make when they're directing their own content is, to Adam's point, like these aren't professional actors. So first of all, like don't give them a script and expect them to memorize it or read it off a teleprompter or, you know, do some perfect version of your marketing language. Like the first mistake you made was having a professional in their industry like quote line for line verbatim like the perfect marketing legalese speak that you want them to say. Like that's just not how these people work. That's not how you're going to get the best, most authentic content out of them, and that's not how you're going to engage patients or other healthcare professionals, because it's going to feel unnatural, it's going to feel inauthentic, it's going to feel staged. They're going to click off that video the second they click on it. You only have less than 15 seconds to capture a person's attention and engage them in a piece of media. So it's extremely vital that in those first few seconds, one, you don't let them know they're watching an ad. So don't start by saying the name of your product or your brand. Don't start with your logo. Don't, you know, let them believe that they are watching something that's important to them personally, that talks about something they care about and is going to engage them, right? And then at the end, you tell them, oh, by the way, this problem that you have or this, you know, challenge your patients are facing that you want to help them through, we have the solution, right? Or we have, you know, a trial, or we have research, or we have, you know, whatever that thing is that you want to give them or that you're trying to promote. So I think that, you know, don't try to script your talent for sure. I agree with that. But I also think it's, when you're not a professional director and you haven't worked with actors and you haven't, in my opinion, if you're a professional director, if you haven't taken acting classes and you haven't been the person on camera, then you are going to struggle with the balance of direction. Because a lot of times when you're throwing too much what you should say, what you should do, how you look right at a person who's never done this or doesn't do it regularly, it's going to shut them down. And that's the last thing that you want. If you want to enable someone who isn't a performer to present confidently and do their best, you can't be nitpicking every little detail of them. So you cannot, like, if they didn't say something exactly the right way you want them to, you have to feel confident in yourself that you can ask them the right questions to lead them into the correct responses. And I would say, I know that you know, Tripp just mentioned his past experience working with helping people push through their fears. You know, I know people hate when you say you're a salesperson. But when you are prompting interviews, you are a salesperson, in my experience, right? Like I you know, after years of professional sales training and work in that, I definitely think that the skills that I gained from that experience enable me in an interview with someone who's not a professional performer to guide their responses so that we elicit the best material for the marketers to use. And if that's not a skill you have, that's okay. Ask for help. That's what producers like us are here for. And if it is a skill that you have, don't overthink it. Like really genuinely, and this is like, I see this struggle all the time. Don't be thinking about the next question. Don't be worrying about like getting the exact story points. Like be present in the conversation with your talent and you will get the best content out of them. And then have someone else who is not the person conducting the interview be paying attention to the time, right? Because if you're not a professional producer or director, you don't have that experience, balancing those things could be really hard for you. So have someone you trust there to keep an eye on the time and make sure you're being cognizant of like when you need to wrap, because time is money when it comes to video. Always, but when it comes to video, especially. And just allow yourself to be engaged in a conversation with your talent, because that's how you're going to get the most authentic responses. To that point, though, and this is another thing as an editor, I think Nason could probably speak to, when someone's not a professional interviewer and they're conducting interviews, the other thing that they do all the time is crosstalk, right? Like they talk about their talent.
Yeah, it's as I got older, I never realized the term of like, hey, when you after you finish a sentence, like for both the interviewer and the interviewee, just pause for a second, you know, because again, they're not thinking for the editor, and that's okay because they're in their own zone and they shouldn't be thinking about anything else. But yeah, that is one thing where, as an editor, where I'm listening and it could be a great statement, and then and again, I will probably be excited too if I heard something and then chimed in the middle of it, right? But at the same time, when it comes to these type of videos, that authenticity of letting the patient just speak for their own, or patient or professionals to speak on their own, is just it gives them that attention that they want. That gives that viewer, it gives that attention that the viewer needs.
Yeah, it's hard because like when you are doing what you're supposed to do and being present to what the speaker's saying, you want to engage with them. Like you want to validate they're saying the right things. You want to make them feel good. You want to make them feel heard, and like you love what they're giving you. So your instinct is to, you know, oh yeah, or oh, I totally get that, but you can't do that when you're conducting an interview on a video, because you don't want you to be a part of the content when you're off camera, right? Unless you're doing like a fireside chat format where you know, the moderator or the interviewer and the speaker are together and you have that context for the audience.
Yeah, or just, I mean, there's even another video we had prior where you were in the introduction, but it gave that context as to why we used it, right? It wasn't out of the person we were interviewed kind of like joked and laughed out, you know. It wouldn't fit in the video if we just put her laughing, talking about, oh, how do I explain this? How do I talk about this one person? Unless we had the context of you, which was like, you made a joke like, oh, I know this is hard to come up with something, which led them to laugh, which made the video feel real, rather than just you hear it in the background and then now you kind of feel like, oh, there's someone on set, you know, messed something up, or you know what I mean? So I think that's a good example where we actually did even use, you know, a soundbite of whether someone of the person being interviewed, you know, but it had to fit at least.
I think that's a perfect point too, Nathan, because it happens to us too, Alyssa. I think I'm willing to, like, this is an example of it going well, but on that same project, there was a point where there was someone who was really uncomfortable on camera and they were like, you know, like, I'm not gonna say this, I'm not gonna say that. And I went, oh, that's okay, and cut them off. And then they kept talking and you couldn't use that bit. So it does happen to us too. Yeah,
absolutely. The style and format too is something that, like, it's about the tone of the content and where and how it's going to be used. Like when you have the context of where that piece is being used, it can shape like the way you approach it. So not every case study that we've filmed is conducted in a super formal way. It depends on who's going to watch it and what's going to engage them and why. So like when we do patient case studies as an example, like when they're giving information to us about like their experience with a product that they're using to, you know, monitor their state of disease, or, you know, whatever tool that they've been enabled with to help keep track of their, you know, genetic testing and things like that. When we're doing a patient case study, a lot of times we know that the end viewer is a prospective patient who may be looking to use this asset or this tool or join this trial or whatever that, you know, CTA is. The best way to enable a layman, like a common person, to understand your product in the healthcare space and be interested in it is to be on their level and speak to them like they're a human being and not talk to them like they're a clinician, right? So the format, to your point, Nason, like, it might be more fun. It may be more like you almost look at content on platforms like YouTube that are by common mainstream brands, and you have to think for yourself, like, I'm competing with this. Like a patient isn't looking for me. They're watching this on YouTube. So how do I help them find me in spaces where they're at? And how do I help them feel like they're just watching any regular video they would want to sit through the whole way through, and then get the takeaway of, hey, if you have this condition or you're following your disease state, you might benefit from this product or you might benefit from this trial.
Thank you for giving me your guys' input on like how it goes on your end. Cause like for Adam and I, like, you guys know more about the client and the individual that we're speaking to we kind of just walk in, and at least, I mean, I could be biased, but I feel like we kind of already have a good energy when we walk into any set, that it can always be positive. There's always a laughter that's going to come out. So at least for me, when I go into a set and I'm going to meet with a patient or a professional, I try to obviously try to talk to them like they're a regular person, because even telling them, hey, Doctor so and so, someone will be like, you can just call me by my name, and it'd be like, all right, awesome, and then we can just move on, and even from that, it's already smooth sailing, because they already dropped that barrier of like, I am a doctor, I am a professional, but I'm not, even as them, I'm not going to see you as any different, as the same way we won't look at them any different. So on your perspective, Adam, like, what is something that you bring into the table when you walk into set to try to like ease the set, to make it positive? Because I go off of your energy, and whatever you bring on, I'm right there, and we're gonna do the same thing together.
Yeah, that being a unified front in regards to the tone of set goes a long way. And I do think we all do that really well. We've worked together so much, we've traveled so much, all four of us together, that I think when people meet us, they're like, man, these guys are friends. I'm part of that friend group. But to Alyssa's point earlier, the way we approach set is really dictated by the content sometimes of what we're filming, right? So, for example, if we're going to a patient testimonial, we want them to feel comfortable. A lot of times we're being invited into their home. And so we want to be respectful of their home. We want to be excited about their story. And what's nice is that the producers take all of the pre-interview information and they make a brief for us. And so we have information about the patient or the professional that we're going to meet with prior to showing up on set. And so we can be excited about the things that they're showing us, because we're aware a little bit, right? We had one patient recently in Minnesota. She's got 3 sons that are teenagers that are athletes. We knew about their sons. We knew about them going to a farm. We got to just enjoy that day with them because we were already invested with the information that was given to us prior to set. I think the other thing to keep in mind is the audience, right? So a lot of times in the case studies done by professionals, they may be sharing research that needs to be replicated, for example. So they're like, hey, here's my data. Here's why it's exciting. Maybe your institution wants to wants to get involved in this study so that we can replicate the data, get enough data to then bring a product to market. And so that's a totally different audience, right? One is to tell like your local oncologist, for example, and the patients to have conversations about a screening test or a new therapy, right? While the other one is a PhD MD who works at a major institution, and he's speaking or she's speaking to other PhD MDs or other PhDs doing research at another major institution. And so the tone and tenor will be a little bit different. But one thing that is consistent that people sometimes forget, especially in the medical space where so much needs to be written in a clinical way, is that it's a person talking to a person, regardless of what is happening. So, we've gotten to know many of these doctors well enough to know that they listen to these kinds of videos while they're driving to work. Because once they're at work, they're slammed. They have so much to do. And so if we make a video that's a case study around research that is looking for more funding or is looking for more duplicate research being done by other institutions, we want to make sure that one, we know the demographic they're reaching out to. 2, that they're genuine and candid, but they're giving the information that they have to give to make it effective, right? And then 3, who are they talking to? Are they talking to patients? Are they talking to PhDs? What kind of verbiage? Because that changes the language sometimes. And so making sure that we come in on set with the energy that matches what we're producing goes a long way. Because we've seen everything from the example you gave, right? Where it's like, hello, Dr. So-and-so. He's like, just call me so-and-so, right? And you're like, great, we'll go by first name basis the rest of the day. But we've also had doctors come on set, and it's sad to say, because these aren't our clients, right? These are just people that have a valuable information for the video who have literally told us, I do not care about what you guys are doing. Which for HCP marketers, I know you guys feel that, because there's times where you're advocating so deeply for some kind of piece of content marketing that other groups within the same institutions don't see the value of. But we know that there's value because we've seen the data, the marketing data online. And so I would say the vast majority of the time, everybody's on set, everyone has the same goal in mind, and everyone's pushing towards that great outcome. What we, I think, are really good at is those very few times that there's someone on set who doesn't see the vision, doesn't see at all the motivation. When really what we're doing is we're telling the people who need their lives saved where they can go to save their lives. And that's a big deal. If you're an oncologist and you have a new therapy or a new test that might save someone's life, our videos are going to tell them to go to those oncologists and to ask those questions. So the way I see our videos is we're informing the people where they can go to save their lives. And so when you have a difficult experience on set, I think we do really, really well at going, okay, this person is struggling for whatever reason. They're not used to being in front of camera. It's not that they don't like us or that they don't want a good video, because we're still recording them and they would want to look good on this video. Now it's time to listen a little bit more, adapt the tone on set, and then go, okay, this is where that person's at. I'm going to meet them where they're at, and let's work together as a crew to guide them to where we need to be for the video. No matter what, we're going to produce a great video.
And it's also because of our expertise and things outside of the medical industry. And then between you and I, we do a lot of documentaries, so we are already aware of people's feelings and how they can feel on camera. And I mean, and this is a tip for anyone that's making any of these videos for any type of industry, is that if they're verbally telling you they feel uncomfortable, this isn't what they usually do, or any sign that they don't want to film, and this usually works most of the time, and specifically towards doctors, right? If I tell them to, let's say I'm filming a B-roll segment and I'm telling them to do a certain thing, and they are telling me that's not what I do. I don't do that. There's a lot of film crews that will not take that answer, and they're gonna say, we need that. For me, I just always go, okay, so what do you do? What is something that you normally do if this was a real thing, then let's just do it. Like, actually tell me what you would tell a patient, just to make them feel less scripted, that this doesn't feel like a commercial. At the end of the day, we don't want it to feel fake or scripted. We want it to be as authentic as possible. So giving them, not a lot of professionals sees other professionals and they think they can't tell them, if a doctor sees a cameraman, they feel like they can't tell them, no, you can't film me this way. There is some people that will respect that. And I feel like that makes our crew unique, is that we have that experience of other people not being that comfortable, but like you said, we can adjust and figure out a way to still make it, like no one's being held to say something on camera, right? Like, we're here because we had fun and we had a good time.
I think a good example is, how do you see a doctor on the computer screen when you look up stock footage? They always have a stethoscope, but not every doctor carries a stethoscope, right? Like, a ton of people are like, they should have had that stuff checked by the nurses because I'm an oncologist, or oh, I'm a dermatologist. Like, what I do doesn't listen to your heart. Like, my nurses will do that to get your vitals before you come in. And so, it's like, hey, carry this stethoscope. And they're like, I'm a surgeon. By the time I'm working, I don't carry a stethoscope.
I think
I don't know about you, Adam, but my podiatrist checks my pulse through my foot. They just they put that stethoscope right through the ball of my foot. And they're just oh, can you take a deep breath?
But I've also I've also felt victim of just assuming, right? Like we've done a lot of videos in these type of spaces where I handed a doctor, here's a stethoscope, and they're like, I don't use this, and I have to remember, oh, okay. All right, let's pivot. All right, if you're an oncologist, let's find out this other tools, or there's always a way that we can figure things out to make them feel like, this represents me, because at the end of the day, the video is going to represent who they are.
I think at the core of what you're saying, it's asking questions, not giving directions, and it's like being open to collaborate. Like, every person that hops in front of that camera should have a voice in how they're being portrayed in the content. And I think marketers who try to manage productions on their own, who are directing their own content, do struggle with catering to the nuances of each individual that hops in front of that camera, and like how to enable them to give a good performance and how to make them feel eager to like be a participant. Because like Adam said earlier, you know, so often, more often than not, I think you are going to come across people who are, especially like we work in conference environment a lot. So a lot of times, like we're going to a large medical conference in a booth, and you only have like 30 seconds or less with, or 30 minutes or less with someone, and you're trying to be hyper conscious of their time, and they are too. Like they have other things that they're committed to. They have other things they're there for. This is just like them trying to fill little bits of downtime to do something, you know, as a favor to you or your institution. So I do think that it has to be about them. It has to be in those moments. It needs to be about this person, even though at the end of the day, as a marketer, like your obligation and your role and your job is committing yourself to your company and your brand and your product. But when you get like your customer in front of the camera to talk about your product or service, first it needs to be about them. You know, you know, it's about their institution, it's about their job and their role and what we're doing that helps them or enables them. But you should focus on their needs first and how they communicate.
Yeah, I think the thing that you keep in mind to drill down what you're saying is, what character do you assume they should play? Because they're not an actor, right? And so they are them. They are playing themselves. And that's the reason why they're on camera, is because they are the expert. They're the ones that everyone wants to hear from. So if you're feeding them lines and they're starting to get uncomfortable, then all of a sudden they're not them anymore. But I do think that there is a role, a little bit, a significant role for the marketers when they're on set with us to listen for major pain points where they can't say something where the legal department will say that video can't go out, right? Because we all know that like doctors use medications off label, doctors find protocols that work for them and their patients that aren't part of the official protocol. You can say, hey, can you reiterate that a little bit? My question is about this. And you guide them to that place where they're going to avoid whatever legal is not going to allow them to say on camera. And so that, again, goes to what you said earlier about understanding how to interview, how to guide the conversation, and how to get what you need without making a non-actor try to be something that they're not.
So this is all a lot of perspectives on our end. So I want to get a perspective on the producers when it comes to like what is some tips you can give out, and what is like some mistakes that happens that commonly happens in this industry.
Yeah, I think Trip, I'll give you a chance to talk about this too, but I'm going to start from like conference perspective, because I do think that there's a lot of major underestimation of what goes into making video content happen at a conference. And more often than not, when you're going to a conference to collect video content, it's because you have one gathering ground where all of your SMEs are going to be in one place, one city. So much of what we do today is remote, and so many partners we work with are spread out across the States or internationally. And a medical conference is a great unifying location to meet up and collect multiple testimonials or statements from, whether it's from your customers, your clients, or if it's from, you know, SMEs who have done a trial with your product or whatever that is. So I do think it's a great opportunity, but a lot of healthcare professionals underestimate, one, the procedures and policies behind these events. So first of all, a lot of conferences want to make it insanely expensive and insanely difficult for you to do your own work in your own way on your own terms, because they make a ton of money off of you using their local vendor who they partner with through the hotel or the convention center or whatever. So their prices are going to be through the roof. And frankly, and this is just my opinion and perspective, and I've had a lot of clients who have validated this, a lot of these convention centers, the AV partners that they collaborate with, who they're also using for video capturing, one, they're audiovisual specialists. They do not do commercial video. So marketing content and the social spaces and, you know, a lot of the platforms that your content's going to go on and live on after the event's over, they're just really not adept at. That's not what they do. That's not what they specialize in. So they're not making content strategically for those platforms. They're using tools that are intended to be used for a totally different purpose, because audiovisual for a live event is completely different than content that's designed for marketing purposes. And we use a different set of tools to create that media. And so they're using the wrong tools for the job. They're doing it really expensively. And I've also heard complaints about the timeline and efficiency of receiving that content following an event, right? So these are parts of the reasons why people choose to use agencies like ours for creating event content. But there's a huge underestimation about the level of work and collaboration with the event host that happens before that occurs. So most events, most medical conferences that do allow what's called an EAC, which we would be working as an exhibitor appointed contractor, is what you would call your video person you're bringing in to create content for you on the showroom floor. Most of the time you have to submit a request at least a month and oftentimes more prior to the event to get approvals to have someone in. When you're a really, really big company, this may not be as big of a deal for you, right? Like if you're bringing the conference a ton of money, chances are they're going to be really flexible with you. But if you're a small business or, you know, a medium-sized business just starting out, and this is one of the few conferences you do a year, and you're pumping tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands into this, and you really just don't have the extra wiggle room, then absolutely you need to be on top of your planning. I would say know a year beforehand what conferences you're planning to be at, and if you want to collect media at that conference in a perfect world. And I'd say at least 3 months ahead, you should be talking to your prospective video vendor so that they can start planning all the logistics and you can start submitting everything you need. You're going to need them to get their certificate of insurance with the specific terms for that event. You're going to have to start coordinating with people who are attending if you're going to get SMEs. And if you're getting customer testimonials, I can't tell you how many small to medium-sized businesses we work with who had the intentions to get all of their customers at this one conference to come in and do a testimonial for them. And it's going to be great. And they're going to pack the whole day full of videos. And they got one person, two people. And a part of that is underestimating their customers' ability to participate, not just based on their schedule at the event, but also does their institution allow them to do testimonials? You know, that's something to consider way ahead of time. You got to make sure that you have permission from their institution to have them do the testimonial, figure out if there's any restrictions on what they can and can't say. And then once you've locked in like who can do it and who's, you know, going to be comfortable doing it on camera and who has the time to do it at the event and isn't like going from presentation to poster to the next thing and, you know, too occupied to make time for it. After all of those logistics are done, you know, you still have to make sure that your video team has the tools that they need to get in and out efficiently with the event. So some places require us to have badging that's for your specific booth. So even if we're planning to be at the conference already, and we might have, you know, badging from our own business, if we're going to be at your booth, chances are, if you're having us there as an EAC representing your business, we need to have a badge for your business while we're there. It's an obligation and a requirement of the event most of the time. So you need to make sure that you have enough extra badges to use video vendors to have them come in and represent you and be at your booth. So there's a ton of logistical things to consider when it comes to planning testimonials. And you have to be very strategic and you have to think ahead. So number one tip for any healthcare marketer who wants to leverage a conference for collecting testimonials or case studies, just get ahead of it. Know what you're doing ahead of time.
Yeah, Alyssa, I think that's perfectly good example of conference. And I think conference really encapsulates all of the pre-production that goes into it because it's such a specific thing. It's it's not just, oh, let's get people, let's get cameras, let's get lights, let's record. It's getting this person here when they have 10 other obligations, when they have all this other stuff. It's going to this park, but it's a public park. We need permits. There's so many different things that we need in order just to set up and shoot. The right space, if it's 16 to 20 feet, to get an accurate shot with depth that actually looks interesting and engages the viewer. There's a lot of this stuff we have to kind of go into handling beforehand, as well as, B-roll. I think that's something you guys are going to talk about. But planning B-roll, like Adam said earlier, walking through someone's life and showing them engaging with life the way they do, or telling their story, you have to know what they're doing. You have to know, what activities mean to them, what people are important to them, who's going to be on camera. And then every person who's going to be on camera, you need specific things from them, like schedules, releases, different things like that. So that there's always just going to be a lot of things. And people like us, Alyssa and I, producers, we know and have the experience of what needs to happen. Oh, we want a drone shot. Okay, well, then we might need permits. We might need to check if it's actual airspace, right? You can fly in this actual airspace, or is it, locked down? There's all these different aspects that go into it. And I think conference is just such a great jumping off point, because it's a max amount of testimonials in a small amount of time. And so you're just really, capitalizing on what you got. But the more people you schedule with, or the more people you review with, the more complex these productions can get.
I think there are a ton of marketers, especially at smaller businesses, who think, well, bullshit. Like, I don't need all of that. I can just grab my phone and go out and do it. Or they think that guerrilla shooting is completely acceptable. And I would say to those people that the second that you're representing a business and a brand, you should not be taking any risk with the name of that brand, especially if you work in something like the medical space. Your credibility can be burnt by making legal mistakes representing your business. So you have to be present to the law, and you need to adhere to it when you're making decisions around how you build your content. So you can't just go to spaces without having permission to film there. You can't, you have to make sure that you're doing everything by the book, because you're representing a brand, and you want to make sure that you bring forth the best image for that business, and that you don't put them in any unnecessary risks.
To add on to you guys' point on the logistics on, adding a drone shot, the logistics to that, for that to happen, it may even turn off a client to not want to do the project. But at the same time, we have to also, have to make sure that they know that these precautions will value the video a lot more. It will make the video visually more pleasing, because a little tip of there is some clients that don't know what B-roll is, and we will have to explain it. And even sometimes explaining it, they're not really understanding why we're doing it. But on the editing side, we may interview someone who has great words but can't put them all together properly, and it's our job as editors to put it together. And it can either make or break the video sometimes, because if the audience is seeing so many cuts happening, and luckily even in our sets we have 2 cameras, so we do have the privilege and luxury to take out some segments and make it also entertaining by showing a different angle. So it's not just jump cuts of the same angle. But that is something that we have to let the client know, that to have an extra camera is very valuable, even if they're only seeing it's just a case study and one guy speaking on camera. Yeah, but he might not be good, and that second camera will save the ums and buts and the pauses and the retakes. Instead of it looking like we've done so many takes, it looks very fluid in one take.
It also helps with doctors who are extremely articulate, or people who are extremely articulate but are like me, and they're quite verbose, and they just speak for long periods of time, and you have to cut it down to size because you only have a 30-second pre-roll, or you only have 2 minutes, and you really want to concisely say that statement. a lot of doctors will go into great depth. And so when you use two cameras or you use B-roll, you can really cut down on that.
And Adam, like, I bet you've had like even clients question like, hey, why is there a 2-camera setup? Or when you do explain B-roll, they kind of look a little lost, but like what would you your inputs on that?
Yeah. So I guess a couple of definitions. A-roll would be anything that's primary content. So if you're watching a movie and A-roll would be, say, Batman walking up to the Justice League and saying his line, right? It's an establishing shot. You see the person talking, all that stuff. And in that, he says, based on the data on my computer. And then the B-roll would be a shot of just the computer with the data on it, right? So the A-roll is Batman talking. The B-roll is the computer. So in our context, the A-roll is typically either a interview or a soundbite that's done staged. Okay, so we're interviewing somebody at a MedTech company. He's talking about a new product that they're about to launch. That's A-roll. And then we cut to just a shot of the product by itself, maybe a beauty shot of the boxing. That's B-roll. And then maybe it cuts to him standing in the lab floor, walking and then talking to camera. That's A-roll. So A-roll is any primary storytelling role that we take in video. And then B-roll is any supplementary footage that's used to better explain what's being said. And so for a doctor, typically we'll interview them and then we'll say, okay, let's go through and film just footage, no audio, of what you talked about. So whether that's an examination or an unboxing of the product, or say we're in a lab and it's a genetic test, right? So let's get some pipetting and let's get some traditional lab footage, right? So those kinds of things is the difference between the A-roll and the B-roll. And so the reason why we use 2 cameras, just to like lock in why we use 2 cameras and what we've talked about, is when you're looking at somebody on one camera and they make a mistake or they talk for a long time and the real main parts that will fit and is needed for the video is maybe the very beginning and then the very end of what their statement was. To cut that down from 2-3 minutes down to 15 to 30 seconds, we will cut from one camera angle to another camera angle. And when that happens, our brains don't put it together that this is 2 completely different moments, right? Now, to even enhance it more, we'll start the statement and A-roll with camera A. We'll go to B-roll of the physician maybe meeting with somebody else or showing the product or just the product. And then when we come back to the person talking, we're at camera B of A-roll. And that makes it, for the audience, very fluid. They would never have known that there was an edit there. Most of our interviews, and Melissa, all of us have been in there, what would you say, 20 minutes on the low end, 15 minutes on the low end, 45 minutes to an hour on the high end.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes longer. And then the videos are at the most, if it's case study, 3 to 5 minutes. Right. So editing everything down and making it feel smooth. We have a lot of things that we do on our end, and it does help for the marketers to understand, okay, what kind of schedule do we want for B-roll? And what is that B-roll going to be? Because understanding that in the pre-production calls with our marketers means that they understand the schedule and how much time it might take, the locations, the kind of B-roll that we want to get, and then who will be in that B-roll, right? So maybe we're interviewing, our A-roll is an interview of the lab director at a certain lab. Well, if we're going to get B-roll with that lab director, well, the lab director is not doing every process. They're not staining. They're not, they're not doing any of that stuff. We need to get other lab techs in there to do that, right? So understanding what A-roll and B-roll means really helps us make sure that everything runs super smooth because the expectations are all understood.
Sorry, there's one other factor too that I want to talk about, and that's like from a marketing perspective is audience engagement and retention, right? Because everything that we do, we should be doing with the intention to create a level of conversion, right? Like if we're making videos, we're doing it because we want to bring in new leads. We want to create clicks to our website. We want to have our sales team get inbound engagement, right? So any video content that you're making when you're doing case studies and testimonials, especially, it's with the intention to drive results. And if you want to drive results, you have to get attention, and then you have to hold that attention. You have to encourage viewers to want to watch the video all the way through. So it's a lot of times in our space, decisions about whether or not you're going to do multicam and whether or not you're going to have B-roll come down to who is the audience the content is targeted at, and what will they feel encouraged to watch all the way through. So if you're talking again to like a patient demographic, you're more likely to want to utilize tools like B-roll to encourage engagement, because attention spans for medical information in a patient population is going to be a lot smaller, versus if you're speaking to a healthcare professional who has like a one-to-one reason to be listening to that content, then they might be a little bit more engaged. And, Adam used the example of like in the MedTech space is a great example of, even if you're talking to a medical professional, why you would want to use B-roll. Like if you're talking about a device and you want the HCP who's watching that content to engage with you or your sales team, they probably are going to want to see what it looks like, how it's utilized, and what's the practicality of it. So I do think that I do think that you should make decisions around B-roll to create good stories, but the reason we're creating good stories is so you drive results.
Yep. Yeah, I was just mention that, you never want to overdo it, because you can overdo B-roll, and we can talk about a patient having their experience of a cancer or a diagnosis they got, and then we're showing B-roll that's nothing relatable to what's being discussed, and that could just throw off that will throw off the audience, because at that point they're like, is this even real? You know what I mean? So that's that good conversation of finding out what should we record and why does that matter? And I think you guys explained it really great on how you guys on your end do it, and how also Adam and I do it on our end. So I got a question, and this question has sparked a bit of controversy within our industry, and that is, what's more valuable, short format videos or long format videos?
Okay, can I hop in?
Yeah.
Because I always look at the statistics at end of year. What we saw in the marketing space in terms of online stats from polling, what we saw was that we're seeing this split of value in both and nothing in between. So if you're still making videos that are like 3 to 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you right now, like, I think that's a waste of money personally right now. I'm not saying that it won't come back in trend. And obviously it's different if you're making something for a specific audience who is obligated to watch it. Like if you're making training content or educational media and you know that they're going to watch it. But if you're making content, you're putting it out on the internet and you're trying to like garner a new following, new leads, then I would say that what we have found statistically in the past year is that you're going to have more success with really, really short format, like 30 seconds or less probably, and really, really long form content. So like 40 minutes and up. Those have been driving the most conversion results for businesses in the past year.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on conversion, right? What is your goal, and what do you want to do with it? So what we've been trying to steer people towards is more information-based long form content that can be then converted into really short sound bites. So that's how you get the most out of it. We have one client who's really great at this. What we do is we do podcast style videos for them, where they're a little bit longer form, 20 to 25 minutes, which for many marketers are like, oh my gosh, that's way too long. It's multi-camera, and you have a host and you have a subject, and they just talk for 30 minutes. Right. And then after the fact, we give them basically 3 categories of deliverables, with, well, 4 if you want to include the transcript, the text. But we deliver the long form, which is the full interview, basically just cutting between angles and only cutting out things that would be an issue with legal or a mistake, or when they're like, hey, can we take a break? I need to get some water, right? Only things that have to be removed. Then we have that same long form in just the audio podcast format, right? So it's just the audio. And then the third thing is they select 5 to 10 little sound bites, basically 30 seconds, maybe a minute or so, that we then deliver as shorts that they can use for social media. So all their shorts drive them to a channel, and then that channel has all their long form content, and then they also post on podcast platforms. So with one day of shooting, look at the value. Now they're going to spend more, but they get so much more than if we were to go intentionally shoot a 3 to 5 minute video. And one of the things that like I always I try to share this with many people as I can, is if you're looking at the data that typically is taught in marketing classes, by the time the data is curated and then turned into a lesson, and then the marketing class happens because it's on a schedule, you may be a year or 2 years behind, right? And so not only are we looking at what Alyssa shared, like, hey, what is the most recent year's data? We're also watching the trends as they're happening. And one of the things that I always encourage our HCP marketers to do is look at what kind of content you're consuming. Like, what do you like to listen to? And sometimes there's 2 boxes. They're like, oh, I like my murder mystery podcasts. But then I go to my job, and that's about medicine, right? So that has nothing to do with each other. Well, they actually have a lot to do with each other. Some people are very interested in the MedTech industry, just as interested as you are in your murder mystery, right? And so what would they want to listen to? Well, they want to listen to something on the drive to work. That may be a 30-minute commute, right? So look at what you're consuming and the category of what kind of content it is, and then see will this be effective within my industry? And I promise you, we have answers for you in those meetings to where it has been effective or ineffective, and we can guide you on whether or not you should do it or not do it. But to go back to that client I mentioned earlier, that has been very effective for them, and it was long form.
Adam brought up a really great point, and that's that you have to look at your audience beyond just their job title, right? Like, when as HCP marketers, we are inclined to seek out audience based on their job title, because that's how we know who we want to buy from us, right? Like, who is our prospective client based on job title. But you have to think about, okay, among that group, among that population of physicians who specialize in this particular area, what is their demographics? Like, how does that break down culturally? How does that break down in age? How does that break? And then from that, you can siphon out, okay, where are these people online? What type of content are they engaging in? Like, your market research should not just look at physicians as who they are in their job, but who they are holistically, and what you need to be in those places. Because while they're on the job, and I think Adam mentioned this before as well, while they're on the job, they're busy. They're probably not spending a lot of time looking at their phone. They might get like a little downtime here and there, but most of what they're doing is engaging in content for pleasure outside of their working hours. And that's where you want to get them. You want to get their attention and get in front of them. And the best way to do that is to be in the places where they're going to be and make content that is entertaining and engaging for them outside of just their work.
The recommendation algorithm that just looks at what you're searching for across platforms. So if you have a physician or a business that you're targeting, and they want to go on and watch their podcast on the drive home, the recommendation list will include what their searches were on other devices that are logged into the same platform. And so you could come across a recommendation list if you're in the platforms that they're looking for other content for.
Yeah. And I think, like you both said, it's short format is to pique interest. Long format is to deliver information. And it's really just, it's an attention economy. It's how much, can we hold on to your attention? But it's also, why am I looking at this as an audience member? Is it giving me value? What is this value add? And so with the short format, it should be drawing your audience to your long format, and that long format should be informing them. And a lot of people just look at that short format and they're like, oh my gosh, this is exactly all the information I need. That's not your demographic. That's not who you're going after. You want the person who goes into that research mode, starts going over, watching those longer formats. I can tell you, I've watched some really long videos that have no interest to the public masses, but go into every bit of detail about maybe it's a consumer product like a laptop or a camera. And I'm learning about every aspect of that camera because that's something that interests me. And I just found out that there's a new camera. They could even be coming to you from a different podcast, right? So we said there was a podcast host in Adam's example. If they go on another podcast and someone just says, oh, hey, that I saw on your thing, you were talking about how this spikes and we can see that engagement. So that person now goes, oh, well, I want to listen to that podcast. And then they start following that host and around on podcasts. So there's the piquing interest with the short format, and there's the delivery of the information with the long format.
Great conversation we had today. Thank you for everyone that was listening. And for those that are listening, comment below any experiences or questions or even tips that you guys have about any projects or anything that happened on set.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.